On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we look at what some are calling the Silicon Valley of the Air Force, remember those lost in a tragic plane crash, and see unmanned helicopters fly. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. The 2018 Defense Policy Bill has been signed, but until a funding bill can be passed, many of its changes can't be enacted. Chief among those is a massive funding increase. While the NDAA authorizes nearly $700 billion in military spending, current budget caps limit spending at $549 billion. So in order for that increase to come, Congress has to agree on a deal to either remove or lift budget caps by the time current funding runs out, set for December 22nd. For the latest on the budget negotiations, visit defensenews.com. And if a deal can't be reached, one consequence could be a return to sequestration, something that would severely reduce military spending. It's part of the 2011 Budget Control Act, and many military leaders blame its 2013 implementation for current readiness issues. Defense News Weekly recently caught up with the outgoing CEO of L3 Technologies, Michael Strianese, and he didn't mince words when talking about the effects of sequestration.
More and more I hear folks say on the Hill that there was not a dumber way to do this. You know, you treated important things no differently than unimportant things. Everything was slashed equally, whether it was needed or not, and it's caused some serious damage. And our adversaries have taken advantage of that, and it has to be dealt with and reversed. So I think it will get done. I think it'll get done this year.
The first of Great Britain's new aircraft carriers has been commissioned. In a ceremony at Portsmouth Naval Base, the HMS Queen Elizabeth was added to the Royal Navy's fleet with one of its namesakes, Queen Elizabeth II, in attendance. While the ship is now active, it will not be operational for several years and will come to the United States next year for flight trials. The ship and its sister, the Prince of Wales, will operate F-35B short takeoff and landing fighters, as well as various types of helicopters. The two ships cost about $4 billion each to build. Canada will order 18 used F-18 Hornet fighters from Australia as part of an interim fighter replacement program, spurning Boeing. The announcement comes as Boeing and Canadian manufacturer Bombardier are locked in a trade dispute over subsidies for a commercial airliner. Canada was originally set to order the F-35, but reopened their fighter competition under the Trudeau government. According to the Canadian government, they are looking for 88 fighters in the end, with proposals due by 2019. Multiple fighters like the Eurofighter Typhoon, Dassault Rafale, and the F-35 are expected to compete. Qatar has signed a deal to purchase 24 Typhoon fighters from BAE Systems in a $6.7 billion deal. Deliveries are set to start in 2022, and British officials say the deal will support thousands of jobs. The deal also includes Pavoy-guided bombs and Brimstone and Meteor missiles. The Typhoon order is only part of Qatar's recent fighter deals. The Gulf state, which is embroiled in a massive diplomatic spat with its neighbors, has also ordered 36 French Rafale fighters and 36 F-15QA Strike Eagles. If all of the aircraft are purchased, it would dramatically increase Qatar's Air Force and regional strike capabilities. Marines are hitting the Taliban's money-making narcotics operations in Helmand province. Check out this video of a HIMARS rocket strike hitting a narcotics factory. Coalition forces say these operations help reduce the Taliban's influence throughout Afghanistan. In a surprise move, Japan's defense minister has confirmed that the country is looking to buy long-range standoff missiles for its aircraft. The Japanese military is looking to acquire the Königsberg Joint Strike Missile for use in its F-35 fleet. Japan is also looking at buying the Lockheed Martin Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range, or JASSM-ER, and the long-range anti-ship missile for its older F-15J fighters. The defense minister says the missiles are only for use in defending Japan, not striking possible North Korean missile launch sites. The Missile Defense Agency is looking to mount laser weapons on drones. Over the past 3 months, the agency has awarded roughly $9 million each to Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and General Atomics. The idea is to integrate a laser system onto an unmanned aircraft that can fly at high altitudes. While the final usage of such a platform is still being developed, MDA's director, Lieutenant General Samuel Greaves, tells Defense News that one idea is to use the drones to destroy ICBMs in the boost phase soon after launch. The program is still in the very early stages, but flight testing could begin in the early 2020s if the designs are stable. According to Northrop Grumman, the company's previously troubled Integrated Air and Missile Defense Battle Command System has had another successful test at Yuma Proving Ground in Arizona. The company says the test proved the system can perform in a, quote, highly complex environment, and that this test took the system to the next level. The system is designed to integrate all of the Army's air and missile defense systems under one command system, but it has faced software problems in the past. But now, if the successful tests continue, it appears those problems have been put to rest. One of the most dangerous missions for Marine helicopter pilots is resupply of forward operating bases. So the Corps is working to develop ways for those helicopters to be unmanned. And at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Daniel Woolfolk got a first-hand look.
If you fly a Huey, you really know how to fly one of these old helicopters. But this one is the ACUS. It flies itself, literally flies itself. There's no pilot in the air, and there's no pilot on the ground. And Marines can summon it with a mobile device.
From that tablet, I'm able to specify what kind of supplies that I want, whether it's ammunition, chow, medical supplies, and then via that tablet, I can control the from landing to takeoff with that bird and watch the progression of where that bird is all the way until it's on the deck next to me.
The aircraft is launched, it generates a safe path through the air, it scans the landing zone for a safe spot to land, and then lands on it. And that's all done with the brains and the flight computer there, generating the safe path, the autopilot turning that into commands for the flight controls, and that actually gets executed under the floor.
It said that in the military, autonomous vehicles are for the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous jobs. The dull jobs, like routine supply missions, might help Marines out because they might not have priority for a manned pilot system, but an unmanned pilot system might be able to get to them. And of course, these will do the dirty and dangerous jobs that some pilots might not feel comfortable with, and that's a real boon to Marines.
It gives us a lot more confidence requesting that support, because without a pilot, we don't have to worry about that concern for a manned mission potentially taking contact. Whereas if we sent this autonomous system, we don't have to worry about any danger to any pilot.
Using an aircraft like this to basically take Marines out of harm's way where they don't need to be, either using this as an unmanned platform to more easily get supplies to Marines so they can keep moving down the field and prosecuting their objectives. Also, a lot of this technology can be used in manned aviation to make manned aviation more safe by ensuring safe paths for pilots to follow, or even aiding them in landing on austere environments.
In this part of development, there's a test pilot who serves as a safety observer who can take over the controls should something go bad. And once this technology is actually on the field, it won't be in a Huey. It can be fit into any other helicopter that the Marine Corps uses. Daniel Woolfolk, Defense News Weekly.
When one thinks of cutting-edge technology, a 50-plus-year-old aircraft isn't usually what you think of. But at Beale Air Force Base in California, one U-2 squadron is being called the Silicon Valley of the Air Force. Air Warfare reporter Valerie Encina got a chance to visit them recently, so I caught up with her about what she saw. All right, Val, thanks for talking with us about this. So first of all, your article, how one squadron is basically the Silicon Valley of the Air Force. Explain it to me. Why?
Okay, so I went to Beale Air Force Base a couple weeks ago and met this squadron, and they were kind of just showing me around, and then all of a sudden they're just like, hey, take a look at these new Garmin watches we got, take a look at these tablets we got. They showed me a couple other really cool technologies that I actually wasn't really allowed to talk about, which was a really big bummer. They're doing some really phenomenal stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, is this some part of some initiative that the Air Force is doing that you could buy all of this? Do you have these new authorities or anything like that? And they're just like, no, we just sort of used what we had and worked with the people on base that do contracting, and really we realized that we could do a lot ourselves. So we thought, we're the end user, we might as well.
So basically they just did it.
Yeah, they just did it. You hear at the top levels of the Air Force people talking about innovation and about, young people who are very in touch with technology, and it all sounds like a little bit, pie in the sky. And it was actually very exciting to meet these guys because, they're actually making it happen, and they're bringing contracting people into their squadron and helping them write requirements and contracts, and even just calling up companies and saying, hey, we might have a use for this, can we test it, and coming up with some sort of an agreement. So it was very interesting to see that happen.
So, and But this squadron, they aren't just any squadron in the Air Force. They do U-2 missions. That's got to be a nice reminder for them every day, the difficulty of that mission going through.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very difficult mission. They were telling me that for the pilots, they spend quite a lot of time deployed, and then they come back and are basically training for, a lot of the year. I think that they said like 6 months of deployments, in a year.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And they are flying one of the oldest aircraft in the Air Force, and arguably the most difficult to fly. And it has amazing technology on it. But you have things like the optical bar camera that's just, it's a film camera, and it's an incredibly awesome camera, but you're still developing film. So I just thought it was amazing to see the contrast of this 1950s era tech combining with these commercial off-the-shelf products that commercial pilots use all the time, but maybe haven't really infiltrated the rest of the Air Force like that.
So with this tech that they're buying, is it the type of tech for taking the intelligence after and the photos after they gathered, or is it like directly that the pilots are wearing?
So there are different things that they're doing. There are wearable technologies like the Garmin watches that are collecting data about the physiological conditions of the body, and also providing information about the route, basically charting the flight pattern of the aircraft.
When you're flying at the edge of space, the biometrics are kind of important.
Yeah, exactly. And then, on the other side, what they're trying to do is find new ways of exploiting this data. So they figured out ways at zero cost to link together a bunch of the data links that are used by the U-2 and pull them into the system that the mission planners use, which you think that would be done already, but it wasn't. And they're actually sending a couple airmen to Apple's app development curriculum to do courses there, so that they can learn how to write apps that can, help fulfill core needs of the squadron, or, figure out how to exploit some of this data better.
So part of this trip was also you were with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and visiting Beale, and you got to spend some time talking with him about the budget and everything like that. What were his thoughts on the funding showdown that we're kind of seeing in Congress right now?
I mean, he very much echoed what you hear from General Dunford, this idea that if there's a long-term continuing resolution, that would be catastrophic. And long-term meaning if it goes into this next year. And then the problem even bigger than that is if we were to return to the Budget Control Act levels. So unless there's some sort of a grand deal that boosts the budget by about like 5%, they're going to have to really cut back and kind of reapproach the budget that they put forward last year. And
that's been a continuing echo for years. This isn't just a brand new this year thing that General Goldfeин's talking about.
No, it's definitely not. It's sort of just every year you kind of hear the same things happening, unfortunately. And as reporters, we hear it's almost like an annual thing, where in December we're going to hear about a funding crisis. So it's fascinating. Val, thanks for joining us today. Fascinating article. Be sure to read it on defensenews.com.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also be sure to add us on Apple News and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we look at how the 101st Airborne Division remembers a somber anniversary and the Army's new jungle uniforms. Soldiers with the Hawaii-based 25th Infantry Division are scheduled to begin testing some new uniform items. So Army Times reporter Charles E. Panzino went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to find out what impact the new uniforms could have on soldiers.
Could you tell us about some of the new features in the new improved hot weather combat uniform?
Yeah, sure. So the improved hot weather combat uniform is different in both material and design than the current ACU. Material-wise, this has a 57-43% nylon cotton blend. Allows it to be slightly thinner but stronger material. And that allows it to also, we can thin that fabric out, lighter weight, breathes faster, dries quicker as well. The collar is a standard collar as opposed to the Mandarin. It has a raglan style shoulder or a baseball jersey shoulder. Again, that gives you more flexibility and less seams of fabric, which just hold moisture and heat. The pocket has an open fastener on the top portion of the shoulder sleeve pocket instead of a front fastener with a zipper, which is on the current ACU. There's no breast pockets on this uniform. Soldiers really didn't need that because in the field it's covered up in kit and it just acts as a insulation that they don't need and traps moisture. There's a 330 denier nylon swatch of fabric on the elbow for reinforcement and comfort. Soldiers really like that when they're in the prone in the field. And moving down to the pants or the trousers, from the top down, there's no back pockets. Soldiers didn't need that in the field. They said it just contributes to too much trapping of moisture and heat. So remove that. There's still your front hip pockets, cargo pockets, and an ankle pocket on both sides. There is a gusseted crotch, and again, what that really does for you is it spreads out the seams. In a traditional trouser, all those seams meet in the crotch, and there's multiple layers that are sewn together. It really contributes to discomfort in soldiers. And so that gusset spreads that out and also adds strength to the uniform. The knees are what's called an articulated knee, so it looks slightly baggy here because there's a little bit more room in it. Those are built out of 330 denier as well for durability and comfort.
Next man, let's go!
And so that articulated knee, again, just gives a little bit more space for that kneecap. When you're taking a knee in the field or maneuvering, you're much less likely to have a blowout. There is a mesh, a knit mesh wrapped around the ankle. They can tuck that into their boot, unblouse their trousers, and then that prevents leeches and other creepy crawlies from getting up into their pants while they're out in the field. So those are the key differences to the improved hot weather combat uniform.
And PEO Soldier is also working on a new version of the Jungle Combat Boot. So what are some of the differences in these boots as opposed to the previous version?
Puncture protection, drainage, breathability, and dry time, as well as excellent traction in mud. Version 1 was built as quickly as possible to meet and fulfill that capability gap, and soldiers had a few points of improvement that they wanted to see made. So primarily they wanted it to be lighter weight, more flexible, and a lower stack height, meaning closer to the ground to increase stability. It'll weigh about a pound less per pair. It's considerably more flexible, and the felt stability is much greater improvement over version 1 of the Jungle Boot.
And which feature do you think soldiers will be most excited about?
Definitely the uniform. I think soldiers are really looking forward to trying it out. I've seen and heard a decent amount of hype about it. They're excited to get this capability, keeps them lighter weight, more comfortable and drier in the field.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
32 years ago, a charter flight carrying 248 soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division crashed in Newfoundland while returning from a peacekeeping mission in Egypt. Military Times reporter Todd South recently visited Fort Campbell, home of the Screaming Eagles, to find out how the division is remembering their fallen.
This iconic structure in the heart of Fort Campbell memorializes those who died in 1985 when a plane carrying 101st Airborne Division soldiers crashed in Gander, Newfoundland, while it was on its way home from a mission in Egypt.
This year's ceremony is for the Gander Memorial, commemorating the plane crash on December 12th, 1985, where 248 Screaming Eagle soldiers from 3rd Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment lost their lives.
Lieutenant Colonel Martin O'Donnell served years later in the very same mission in the Sinai.
We're learning a lot about a tragedy that happened 32 years ago, and I know that the larger mission was happening then, it's still happening now. Could you tell us a little about what soldiers were doing in Sinai to begin with before the Gander crash?
Sure. The Multinational Force and Observers was the mission that the soldiers who were returning to Fort Campbell were participating in. And it's a peacekeeping mission, independent from the United Nations, brought about following the Camp David Accords. And the mission itself is to monitor and keep the peace between Egypt and Israel to ensure that they're not massing on each other's borders.
And you have something in your hand there a lot of people might not be familiar with. Can you tell us a little bit about this piece of history?
I do. So this was my beret that I wore while serving as a member of the Multinational Force and Observers. And I did that early on in my career, and that was my first exposure certainly to the Gander tragedy, and something that still stays with me today. So I'm very proud to have worn this beret. I'm very proud myself to have served in a Gander Memorial in Sinai, Egypt, to commemorate this tragedy, and certainly proud to be a 101st Airborne Division soldier.
So we're walking among some trees that have a pretty significant connection to this tragedy. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So each tree represents a life lost in the Gander tragedy, and each one was in fact donated by Canada, a young Canadian girl who was so struck by the gravitas of the loss of life on that day, and donated it to Fort Campbell and the 101st Airborne Division. We come out every year to remember those that were lost, and that's something that we take very seriously here at the 101st. Our Gold Star families, so we invite them to come out every year for this event, and for so many others. You know, you can't help but to be struck by the loss of life in general, but then as it pertains to the Gander Memorial.
And the multinational force and observers mission that these soldiers were on in the Sinai continues today, as does their memory. Todd South, Defense News.
And when we come back, find out how to escape from the trunk of a car. On this week's Money Minute, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers her tips on how to create a budget when buying a car.
If you're buying a car, the sticker price isn't the only thing to look at for how much you're actually going to pay. The cost of owning a car varies from state to state, but almost all states tax car purchases. That can add anywhere from 4 to 7% to the price of the car. The dealer might also tack on fees to prep your car, process paperwork, or set up financing. Other line items that can add hundreds of dollars to your costs are tags, titles, and registration. These are all necessary to legally drive your car. Last but not least is auto insurance. The premiums will vary between new and used cars, and higher-end cars will usually cost more to insure. And when it comes to financing, getting a pre-approval saves you time and even money at the dealership, since your budget and your spending limit is firm. When you're in the market for a car, budget and shop wisely. It'll be worth it to your wallet.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. Knowing how to escape the trunk of a car is something you hope you will never have to use. But as former Navy SEAL Clint Emerson explains, it could be the difference between life and death.
100 Deadly Skills, Skill 89, Escape from an Automobile Trunk. Trunk escapes. The first rule is don't get kidnapped. Don't get put in a trunk. But it is easier to escape these days than ever before. Since 2001, all manufacturers have to have either a latch, a lever, or a button inside the trunk so that people can get out easily. This was mainly for kids, but it obviously is great for anyone who gets kidnapped and thrown in the trunk. So the first thing you need to do is look for that latch. Usually it glows in the dark. With high-end vehicles, it's actually illuminated with like an LED or something that lights it up. But once you're thrown in there, it's going to take time for your eyes to adjust and actively look for something either glowing in the dark or lit up and grab it, push it, pull it, and get that trunk open. You want to escape as soon as possible. You do not want to get to the first stop. You do not want to get to the second stop. You want to get out of that trunk as soon as the vehicle slows down or comes to a stop at a stop sign or a red light. Escape as soon as possible is the #1 rule. If you can't pop the trunk or punch out a light and signal for help, now you have to become more aggressive, which means you're going to have to enter the passenger compartment. You can do this by kicking down the back seat, and you got to kick it violently, hard, and then crawl through and escape, hopefully out the back doors of the vehicle.
That's all we have time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to visit defensenews.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.